Welcome to Inside Politics with Kevin Klein, beyond the headlines, beyond the spin. Straight facts, sharp analysis, and common sense conversation you won't hear anywhere else. Let's get started.
Hi, I'm Kevin Klein. Welcome to another edition of Inside Politics. I'm pleased to be joined by three of my colleagues from the Winnipeg Sun. We have columnist Jeff Currier, columnist Royce Koop, who is also a professor of political sciences at the University of Manitoba, and we have columnist Lawrence Pinsky, KC, who is a former human rights adjudicator. And today we have a very busy show. We've got lots of clips to show you to kind of give you an idea of what's happening inside politics here in Canada. But we tape on Friday mornings, and this has been a very busy morning because of Donald Trump. Well, Donald Trump and Doug Ford. It seems Donald Trump is taking a disliking to Doug Ford's commercial where he's spending millions upon millions of Ontario tax dollars to run a commercial in the United States that is voiced kind of by Ronald Reagan, talking about tariffs. Trump does not like that. And now the Ronald Reagan Association is talking about legal action. But Trump has said we are ending trade talks with Canada because of this, and they're introducing new tariffs on top of Canada. Let's take a look at it and have a quick chat about it.
When someone says, let's impose tariffs on foreign imports, it looks like they're doing the patriotic thing by protecting American products and jobs. And sometimes for a short while it works, but only for a short time. But over the long run, such trade barriers hurt every American worker and consumer. High tariffs inevitably lead to retaliation by foreign countries and the triggering of fierce trade wars. Then the worst happens. Markets shrink and collapse, businesses and industries shut down, and millions of people lose their jobs. Throughout the world, there's a growing realization that the way to prosperity for all nations is rejecting protectionist legislation and promoting fair and free competition. America's jobs and growth are at stake.
All right, well, the commercial, it looks fine, it's edited fine, but I have an issue with this, that it's fine to engage in a trade war, and it's fine to go back and forth. But I think taking a message from a former president and manipulating it to be something that promotes Canada, I guess, I kind of think that they did the wrong thing here. Royce, I want to start with you being the professor of political sciences. Has Ford gone too far?
Yeah, it's possible for politicians to outsmart themselves. This is a very good-looking ad. And it only cost them $75 million to wreck our negotiating position with the United States. When Doug Ford was explaining this morning, he kind of made it clear that he was trying to appeal directly to Republican politicians, to Republican voters, the non-MAGA wing of the party, the Ronald Reagan wing of the Republican Party. Well, here's a newsflash for the Premier of Ontario. That faction of the party doesn't really exist anymore. The Republican Party is the MAGA party. It's the Donald Trump party. It's time to stop, trying to outsmart these people. It's made things worse. But the only thing I would add here is that this is very convenient for Mark Carney. Before this happened, Carney basically acknowledged that we weren't going to get relief from these 25% tariffs. We weren't going to get a tariff deal in the, quote, foreseeable future, and that we would be stuck with these 25% tariffs until at least 2026. So negotiations weren't going anywhere. They weren't close to an agreement. And so shutting them down, I'm not sure it makes the biggest difference. And we shouldn't be distracted from the fact that Carney has not gotten a deal on this, despite months of being in the field for it.
Well, and it's something Ford has done before, right? He said he was canceling all or putting on a tariff of all energy going to the United States. Trump responded to that, and Doug, quickly bowed down and ended that very quickly. And now here he is causing more problems. Jeff, and I know how you feel about Trump, a little different than the rest of us, but was this the right thing for Ford to do? Is this the way you negotiate with another country?
No, I agree with Royce that this was a misplaced strategy on the part of the Ford government. Was a bad idea. I also agree that the the Ronald Reagan faction of the Republican Party, the kind of Republicans that you could sit down and have a conversation with, like the John McCains of the world. Those people don't exist in the Republican Party anymore. Or if they do, they're certainly silenced in that party. And now you're dealing with a man who's prepared to negatively impact hundreds of millions of people out of sheer petulance. That's what Donald Trump is doing. So I don't defend the Doug Ford strategy. I thought it was a bad one. And Donald Trump, being the narcissistic child that he is, responded predictably.
Well, Lawrence, I mean, here's something that you do negotiations. As an attorney, you'd be involved in negotiations. I don't think you start a fire just before the negotiation.
I've got to tell you guys, it seems to me that we have the Timbit League playing in the professional league. This is supposed to be Team Canada, and Mr. Ford is supposed to be the right winger. And instead, although he's built like an NHL player, in fact, from the neck up, it's like we're dealing with the Timbit. How is it that he couldn't figure out that this was a huge mistake? This is not how you deal with President Trump. He is a difficult player. He's a difficult guy. He uses Roy Cohn type strategies. You don't do what this is. Now, in terms of, I've read a fair bit about this, watched the ad. Ronald Reagan was a free trader, but Ronald Reagan actually in that address was talking about imposing tariffs on Japan when they were flooding the US market and treating Americans or American producers unfairly. So he did impose temporary tariffs. That's not petulance. That's not bad strategy. That's intelligent strategy. And that's what Reagan was doing. It's not that in some ways, although the presentation of Reagan was so much more polite and classy than what Mr. Trump does, the principle, actually from an American perspective, not from our perspective, is sound. And it's really, really appalling that this is Team Canada. This is the guy that chose Mr. Carney over Mr. Poilievre. This is the guy that has come up with the strategy. You're right, Kevin. He's had to backtrack twice before when he said he would cut off energy. Then he said he'd tax, he'd tariff energy. So we have to be able to do a lot better. And Mr. Trump isn't acting out of petulance or stupidity or childishness. He's acting out of American foreign policy strategy. And from his perspective, he's winning concessions across the board from country after country. I'm a free trade guy. This is a long-term mistake, but it's short-term gain, and it's at our cost. And we have to get our A-team involved if we have one. Look at what Brian Mulroney did, how he dealt with President Reagan after Trudeau, who had not been able to deal effectively with any American president. That's Trudeau the first. That's what we need to be doing. This is a huge clustered mistake.
Well, and I don't think Canadians, for the most part, and correct me if I'm wrong, understand just how bad this is going to be for us. I'm going to play a clip here of Premier Danielle Smith. She was talking to a group in Ottawa, appearing at a hearing of some sort, talking about all the laws that have been put in place about no pipeline, none of this, you can't do that, you can't do this. And she shares a little bit of information about what's happened in the last few weeks here in Canada. And I'll play the clip and let her tell you.
Oil tanker ban and the clean electricity regs, which penalize Alberta's power sector and will drive up energy prices for Canadians and make natural gas a disadvantaged feedstock. These regulations and draft policies have resulted in economic stagnation of one of the single greatest acts of self-harm in Canada's economic history. And as a result of these policies, and there are more of them than I listed, in the last 120 days, Canadian-based companies have announced more than $20 billion in capital investment in the United States.
Danielle Smith, very calm, cool, and collected about it. She's trying to keep her composure, but she's talking about Canadian companies that have decided to take $20 billion of capital investment and say no to Mark Carney's Canada and say yes to Donald Trump's United States. How is that going to hurt us, Jeff?
Well, it's obvious how it's going to hurt us. The motivations for companies moving are many and varied. If you want to talk about moving head offices, Mark Carney might have an explanation for why he moved his. to the United States. That would be one point. But it's possible that they just see that the tax structure is much more friendly south of the 49th parallel. Some companies, especially in manufacturing, can perhaps avoid some of the tariffs that we're going to be looking at for at least the medium term, as you said, 2026 and probably beyond, because America is becoming even the Republican Party now has become a party of protectionism. Traditionally, the Republicans, of course, were the free trade people. But as we've said, those days are long gone now. The Republican Party, just like the Democrats, tend to be more protectionist. So maybe that's some of the motivation for some of the companies moving south of the border. But obviously, when you're talking about that kind of cash, that's a lot of money in Canadian terms.
And you're adding that 20 billion that just recently left the country, not by U.S. companies that were in Canada. You know, there have been a number of U.S. companies that have said, well, we're going to take our money back down to the United States and we're going to invest there. These are Canadian corporations saying, I can't invest in Canada. I don't have the confidence. We're taking this money down south, Lawrence. That, to me, is a very, very big red flag when you add it to the hundreds and hundreds of millions in capital that has already left the country.
You're spot on. And remember, the economic genius, Mr. Carney, in the Oval Office bragging that trillions of dollars are leaving Canada to invest in the United States. He bragged about it. It's atrocious. And we've talked about this before because it's about creating economic certainty and removing the prohibitions on development in Canada in an intelligent way, not just completely, but an intelligent way. We could easily do that and create a structure, an economic structure in Canada that makes sense for investment, for pipelines, for LNG, for silica in Manitoba. But we're not doing that. We're having Mr. Carney and his cohorts have a little subgroup that's going to decide which projects they want to proceed with, ignoring the mounds of conflicts from Brookfield and his other investments. And that's supposed to instill confidence in Canadians to invest here, in anyone to invest here.
Well, I mean, Danielle Smith has been right about everything from the very beginning of this of the election of Donald Trump, and she was dismissed and insulted. She was called a traitor by some people. Turned her back on Team Canada. She's been right about anything or right about everything. You know, the reality is that when there are 25% tariffs imposed on products that are produced in Canada and most likely to be exported to the US, any company that is able to move production to the US is going to do so. That's just obvious. The federal government can never subsidize these companies, enough to make up for that difference. And we're starting to see that now. In the last 2 weeks, we've seen literally thousands of jobs in the auto sector just disappear overnight, and it's going to get worse because we can't deal with these levels of tariffs. Even cutting them in half, even getting them cut down by 5 or 10% would make a big difference. But if these are going to be here for the medium term, or even worse, if they're going to be permanent, we can say goodbye to a whole lot of the Canadian economy, a lot of the manufacturing economy as well.
Well, and Royce, sorry, those subsidies are taxpayer dollars. We can't afford it. It's atrocious. There is no federal government. There's taxpayer wallets. That's what there is. And it's really a completely failed policy. Will Canadians wake up and see it? They'll be compelled to when the market falls, when we can't fund what we want to fund.
But why not? Why is this not the front page of every newspaper across Canada, on the CBC, on the CTV, Global News? Why are they not talking about the jobs that are lining up to leave Canada? I want to play a clip from CTV News, where they did talk about, it's a company, I believe, based out of Quebec that builds transport trucks, and they're shutting down and going to the United States. We'll take a quick look at this.
It's a truck manufacturing plant in Quebec, in Sainte-Thérèse, Quebec, just north of Montreal, where we're getting news that 300 jobs are being eliminated. This plant makes heavy trucks the Peterbilt brand of trucks. And now the union involved is condemning those layoffs, saying the 300 workers are the latest victims of Donald Trump's trade war. Union adds the time is running out for negotiations between Canada and the U.S. to come up with some kind of a deal. We should point out, not only does the facility manufacture light and medium Peterbilt trucks, also Kenworth trucks, and a big wrinkle here, President Trump has said that as of November 1st, medium and heavy size trucks that are made outside of the United States will be hit with a 25% tariff. Again, he wants these trucks built domestically within the United States, not in other countries like Canada. This plant has laid off workers previously this year as a result of all the trade uncertainty. The headquarters, by the way, it is an American company. The headquarters are in Washington State.
So there's one. And now I want to play a clip for you from Pierre Poilievre in the House asking about, the other jobs that have lost, the Oshawa plant for General Motors losing jobs. There was an EV plant here in Canada. I think it was, I don't exactly know the town it was in, but it was in Ontario. It's shutting down, and they're saying, oh, that's because nobody's buying EV cars. It's like, well, don't you have some kind of a rule in place where everyone's going to have EV cars? And so on. So the jobs are lining up. People are leaving. You're actually waiting in line to get out of the country when you have jobs. So let's look at this clip from Pierre Poilievre and talking about how the Liberal responds.
But now Canadians are learning it was a bait and switch. Today, another terrible tragedy. As they laugh, 1,200 workers at the Ingersoll Cami plant learned that they would lose their jobs after that Prime Minister promised he would negotiate a win and that he would keep their jobs here in Canada. They join with 2,000 workers in Brampton, many more in Oshawa. How does the Prime Minister look in the eyes of the very workers that he sold out and betrayed?
I'll tell you how the Prime Minister will how he will deal with the auto sector. He will look at the auto workers in the eyes and he will say, we will fight for your job. That's exactly what we're doing every single day. We're negotiating back in Washington, but also this is important to say that I met this morning with the Canadian CEO of GM. I was in conversation with the head of the labor union of Unifor, and I also talked to Doug Ford, and I talked to Vic Fideli. And you know what? We're putting in place a response group. We will make sure that we fight for these jobs.
She announced just now that she talked to this person, and she talked to that person, and she talked to this other person, and she talked, and she talked, and they talked, and they talked.
Okay, so there's Pierre Poilievre talking about Jolie just saying, well, I've talked to this group and we've talked to that group and we can tell auto workers we're going to fight for their jobs, and they're going to have to fight for their jobs by flying down to the United States where all the jobs have moved to. I mean, when is this going to become the biggest issue that we're talking about, Royce?
Well, it's not, because apparently Pierre Poilievre said something mildly controversial, and so everyone is talking about that. That's what the media is focused on.
That's the RCMP thing.
Yeah, it's outrageous. But not what he said. The kind of focus of the media on this pretty innocuous comment, I think. But anyway, these jobs, we're talking thousands of jobs disappeared in the course of a few weeks, and this is just the beginning. The GM plant in Oshawa is getting ready to have layoffs. That's going to be thousands more jobs. And when we talk about this, what are we talking about? We're talking about families. Probably the primary breadwinner in those thousands of families is now out of work. What are they going to do in the current Canadian economy? Go drive Uber? Is support their families that way? These were good paying, unionized jobs that sustained whole parts of Ontario, whole parts of this country for a long time, and they are disappearing. Like, we need a deal. Like, it should have happened months ago. Mark Carney was told that delaying any kind of relief, delaying any kind of deal was going to have these kinds of disastrous consequences, and it's exactly what's happening. It was totally predictable.
Well, Lawrence, I mean, you've talked about it a couple of times about how Carney was supposed to be the negotiator. He has a very impressive CV, we have to admit. He has a very impressive CV, but no disrespect to Royce, but as you know what they say, those who can do, those who can't teach. So what do you think we're learning from Mark Carney in all this?
Well, first of all, I'm going to defend teachers, including Royce, and I too have taught.
Thank you.
From time to time. So it's not that, but sometimes when we interview young lawyers who want to join the firm, we have someone with a fantastic resume, every box checked, but when you talk to them and ask questions, it's platitudes and nonsense. Not for everybody, but for some. Those are the people to avoid, not to choose to lead the firm, not to choose to lead the country. And that's what we're stuck with. I want to pick up on something Roy said earlier. It's not just the thousands of jobs lost. The linkages into the economies of those Ontario towns are going to be devastated. And so it seems shocking to me. I agree with you that the press isn't covering it, but I can give you approximately 1.4 billion reasons why it's not being covered by the CBC. They're called dollars, federal dollars, that go directly to mainstream media so that they're bought and paid for. It's that in itself is a huge scandal that shouldn't be allowed to continue. And that's why we're not seeing it. In terms of the other thing Royce raised, the RCMP comment, there's a lot of merit actually to what Mr. Poilievre said, and he clarified, he was referencing previous leadership. It's really a tempest in a teapot. It's not like the RCMP haven't been known to cover up internal sexual assaults, internal harassment, all sorts of other problems. That was fine. But when Pierre Poilievre talks about problems with how they didn't go after Mr. Trudeau, suddenly the earth is set on fire. It's ridiculous.
But listen, we're losing thousands and thousands of jobs and billions and billions of investment. I don't care. I don't care what he said, right? He said that. People will make up their own mind. Let's move on. Jeff, you and I have been in the media a long time, and I mean a long time, right? Like we were around when we were doing radio plays, probably.
The earth was still flat when I started.
You'd never know, Jeff, with some of the comments.
So, I mean, how do you explain the coverage of all this and all these jobs going away and it making the C block, as you and I would know what that means?
Yeah, I think politics is about, and Pierre Poilievre should know better than to shoot his mouth off the way he does sometimes. And he gets himself into trouble. You can fill entire libraries with the mistakes that the RCMP has made over the years. That's I say this with all respect to some of the fine men and women who wear the red serge. But the RCMP as an organization needs to be gutted and rebuilt from the bottom up. There are countless instances of how the RCMP has botched investigations, has botched procedures, internal problems. They have a commissioner now who handles internal complaints, and the stack of complaints on that commissioner's desk is huge. So no, I'm not defending the RCMP. But Mr. Poilievre needed to, I think, temper his comments or steer them in a different direction. If he's still worried about picking on Justin Trudeau, he's got to find something else.
Yeah.
Justin Trudeau is long gone. Yeah. What he needs to do is convince Canadians that he is the guy who can get a deal with Donald Trump, that he is the guy who can make this happen, that he is the guy who can get these tariffs reduced or eliminated so that those jobs stop bleeding out of Canada. And he hasn't persuaded Canadians yet that he is the better choice than Mark Carney. And I think that's what he's going to have to do. Justin Trudeau's gone. I mean, and his two big things, as we've all talked about, were Justin Trudeau and the carbon tax. Both of those things are gone. Time for Mr. Poilievre to move ahead and find a new strategy.
Very fair and reasonable comments. And being an ex-politician, I can tell you, when you make a comment like that, which is very minuscule, the media, especially the left-leaning media, is going to pick up on it, and it's going to be the biggest story they ever ran. And then you're going to get it from other members of parliament who want to keep it going. Because for some reason, this country has become, a service to victims. You want to be victimhood. That's how you get heard. You're a victim, right? Everyone's a victim of something. Somebody says something, I'm a victim. That makes me feel bad. You have to take that back. An MP, a Liberal MP from Winnipeg, Dr. Doug Eilfson, put out a tweet about what Poilievre said, and I have to read you the tweet because I want your opinion on it. He said this: "My father served in the RCMP for 24 years. He risked his life for the safety of Canadians more times than he could count. Pierre Poilievre has disgraced the memory of my father and insulted every officer who has ever served in the RCMP. This cannot be forgiven or forgotten." Really?
Yeah. This is cheap politics. This is politics at its very cheapest.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, this is what resonates with a lot of people, and the Canadian media, as lazy and as stupid as some of them are, will pick up on stuff like this.
Yeah, but
it's just we're missing the big picture, as you guys have alluded to. We're losing tens of billions of dollars in investment. We're losing thousands of jobs every day. We don't have a deal with the United States. We've got a budget coming up, which is going to be. I think I'm terrified. I mean, Halloween is coming, but I'm a lot more frightened about this budget that's coming up. And yet we're concerned with we're picking fly dung out of pepper here, guys.
I was hoping for seafood.
You know what? I expect a comment like that from the Kardashians, somebody who's a member of parliament, right? I mean, that's just, it's what is that guy's show that used to have where they throw chairs at everybody? Springer, right? Jerry Springer. It's like he should be on the Jerry Springer show. It's just ridiculous. What kind of a comment are you making? And what value do you have to Canadians by putting that out there? Absolutely nothing, Doug. And I know Doug. Doug, that was childish. But hey, let me play this clip for you, because we are talking about all the stuff that's going on in Canada, and we're talking about all the jobs that are being lost, and we can see inflation is increasing. We know that the Canadian dollar is diving. It will probably win a gold medal for the dive because it's diving so perfectly. And we have a prime minister, though, that paints a different picture. Here's a clip of the prime minister in the House explaining what's been going on since he's prime minister.
Mr. Speaker, this budget will get operational spending under control. It will balance our spending over the next 3 years. But we're not going to stop there. We are going to invest in this country. We're going to have the biggest investment in this country in generations, the largest capital spend in generations, the most ambitious trade diversification in our nation's history. We will do everything to help Canadians get ahead, as they have gotten ahead every single month since I became Prime Minister.
So, gentlemen, our Prime Minister says life has actually gotten better and more affordable since he became Prime Minister. I'm not sure where, but
I can tell you where.
Okay, tell me where.
The cottage at Rideau. That's where. Where he lives, it's gotten a lot better. For every other Canadian, it has not gotten a lot better. I suppose if you own stock in Brookfield that he used to run, that's headquartered now in New York because he moved it, maybe it's a little better. But otherwise, it's not better. It's atrocious. And Doug Alifson, I'm just going to go back to that. Dr. Doug, all the respect to his father, who served as an RCMP officer, if that's what he did, and other RCMP officers. But what a ridiculous, stupid comment from the guy who said Jesus was a Palestinian, who hasn't said anything about the economy, who's done nothing to fix healthcare. What a waste of time that guy is, and that comment is. I do want to also say that, Jeff, I agree with almost everything you said, which is wonderful. I like to agree with you, but I don't agree that the carbon tax is gone. It's not gone. It's hidden as an industrial carbon tax. It affects food prices, affects industrial manufacturing, affects many, many things. So it's not gone. It's hidden.
But in fairness, it was there before. Comment, Lawrence. Okay. It was removed as a consumer tax. But right, your point's a valid one. It hasn't been removed entirely.
So it's still there. And as for the bubble that the Prime Minister lives in, I hope Canadians will pop it, and sooner rather than later. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, I don't want to hijack the conversation, but Ailson, I agree. It's not even really worth commenting on. The bigger thing, I think, is this kind of immaturity in the Canadian establishment. Politicians, it matters far less what you're actually saying than if you're saying it too harsh. If you're being too harsh, if you're being too mean, that's the real concern here. And the end of Stephen Harper's time as Prime Minister, people, mainstream columnists, are kind of saying like, well, he was actually a good prime minister, but he was too mean. We didn't like the way he spoke. We didn't like this. We didn't like that. It's a real kind of sign of kind of immaturity in the establishment in this country. And as for Mark Carney, we're hearing lots of.
Before you go into Mark Carney, let's talk
Yeah.
about that. Is it not true? Can't you not say? I mean, if you look at a number of politicians that are coming in, whether they're from the Liberal Party or the NDP Party, they are all victims. They're looking to be the next victim. They don't put out something that, makes sense. He didn't put out an argument into protecting the RCMP. All he did was, oh my goodness, you've destroyed the reputation or the honor of my father. He went to that victimhood. And how do you stop that with these politicians that are being paid hundreds of thousands of dollars to do their job and save jobs and bring more jobs to Manitoba or to Canada, to anywhere, but they're playing victims?
Tell him that kind of melodrama is more appropriate for stage actors than for politicians. Other than that, I don't know.
All right. I cut you off about Carney. Go ahead. Finish your thought on Carney.
We're hearing rumors now that there could be an early election. The Liberal
I told you guys that weeks ago.
Yes, in fairness, you did it. But they're going to manufacture their own defeat and go into an election. There makes a lot of sense. The kind of future that we're facing in the short term, the jobs that have left is just the beginning. We're probably moving into a recession. It's going to last a long time. And if the Liberals think they can get a majority government before that recession really settles in, then that's a good strategic move. And so in some ways, the Liberals are kind of betraying what's really happening right now. Things are not getting better for Canadians. They're about to get a lot worse.
Does it play into the Liberals' hands also to have an early election to kind of, because they can force it. They can force an early election. Given that Pierre Poilievre is set to face a leadership review come February, and the Conservative Party is far from settled in its strategy, and they have not reaffirmed Mr. Poilievre as the leader. Is it to the Liberals' advantage to go early because of those factors?
It's a chess game. You're absolutely right. I would do it.
Sorry, Royce.
I think the bigger consideration is the NDP. I mean, Poilievre is a kind of known threat. He can probably win the same number of votes, the same number of seats, hope maybe, but it's the NDP that's in a leadership race. I mean, it'd be really sneaky, having an election when a party is in the middle of a leadership race, and we don't know how that's going to turn out, if the NDP is going to make a choice that's going to be good or disastrous for them. They're fully capable of going in either direction. And so if Mark Carney can short circuit that, I think I agree with Kevin. Like, it actually does make strategic sense. It's sneaky, it's manipulative, but yeah, it makes sense given what's coming.
But let's talk about the math for a second, because that's what puzzles me. Assume the Conservatives vote against the budget. Assume the Bloc votes against the budget, trying to piggyback on PQ, the fact that PQ is so far ahead in the polls. How does the NDP vote against the budget? They have, 6 or 7 people there. The Liberals are 3 seats shy of a majority. I'm not sure how the math works. You said, Royce, what I was going to say, that the NDP are the critical factor here. They don't have a leader. They have very few seats. They don't have official party status. I'm not sure this is the time for them to go.
But they're using this to make themselves stronger if there was an election. They are saying they're not going to just support a budget just to stay in office. Now, if you recall, that was one of the reasons they lost so much support in the last election, is because they propped up Justin Trudeau. And that was played up for months and months and years, that they propped up Justin Trudeau. And if you listen to some of the candidates that are running for leader, they are saying that they don't want to just rubber stamp this budget. We're also hearing from Tom Mulcair that there is a bunch of infighting within the NDP party right now.
Yeah.
Several of them may not even show up to vote. And
that
could be
right. That's the interesting part. If that's what happens, then we will be at the polls in the winter. But it seems to me it's suicidal for the NDP. If they wait a little bit, have leadership, then they can run from the left, which is at least rhetorically vacant. And don't forget what the Liberals are going to do. They're going to jack up deficit spending, call it investment. It is a chess game. I think it's fair what Royce said, that the Liberals are setting it up. Carney's setting it up
to defeat his own budget.
Possible. It's possible for
Right?
sure.
He's going to make
maybe
a
even
great
likely.
budget that's going to give everybody all kinds of money. It's going to make all kinds of promises. People are going to be clamoring to get their checks. And then he's going to make sure that nobody votes it through, so that you have to give him a solid majority to make all this stuff happen. That's what this is the conversations we used to have in party politics. You'd even hear it at city council when I was a city councilor. Well, we need to put this out in the budget so people vote and do this and do that. And whether it happens or not it doesn't matter. So that's what I think that they're doing as well, is they've got strategists, right? It's not them necessarily. They have strategists, like, Doug Ford had a strategist that said, hey, I think it'd be a good idea to poke the bear. And I think he should, do it a couple of times and see what Trump does, which was a mistake. And I think that right now they're getting the advice that this might be a good time to pull the trigger, and it's not unusual, right, Jeff? I mean, we could see.
As I said, the NDP's in a real bind, though, because they not only do they not have a leader or a clear strategy anymore, a clear platform, an identifiable platform, they don't have the money to run an election campaign. And as you know, Kevin, I mean, well, you guys have all been involved in election campaigns. It takes a lot of cash. And so, I mean, the NDP may not want to be seen to be propping up a government whose popularity is in decline, but have they got the resources to go out and fight an election and maybe regain official party status? They're in a tough bind right now.
But let me give you the devil's advocate side. If you're one of the, I think it's 7 NDPs that were elected to the House of Parliament, if you're one of those 7, you're winning your seat again anyways. You have nothing to worry about. They won their seats. They won their seats handily. So they're going to be back. So their paycheck's not at risk, right? They're not at risk. But if they're having infighting, some of them don't show up, and the ones that do show up vote against, non-confidence vote.
Yeah,
and I believe Carney wants that. I believe he wants that.
He should want it strategically, because he's past his peak, and the situation is only going to get worse. If you are a Liberal advisor, if you're Jerry Butts or one of the others, you would say, do exactly that. Pull the plug. It is the NDP that holds the key.
Yeah. So let me talk about a couple more things as we wind down the show a little bit, and keeping on the same topic, same genre with the budget, for example. I want to play this clip from Stephen Guilbeault, who is talking about, a reporter asked him about the CBC 5-year plan. And all the rumors that we're hearing is that Carney is going to give more money to the CBC because they need to reach people in Western Canada. The only way they could really reach people in Western Canada is to go off the air. And then they would gain support in Western Canada. But he says something in here that really catches me as being, well, listen to it. You take a listen.
Look at the CBC's 5-year plan.
I think there's lots of really good elements in this plan. I really like the fact that the public broadcaster wants to invest more in local news across the country. You saw some of that. Certainly, we think that more. If we can, as you know, we committed to invest more in the public broadcaster, and we believe that those additional resources will help them make sure that Canadians have access to more information, non-biased information, and more local news across the country.
To be clear, that'll be in the budget, that promised funding.
I'm not the finance minister. I don't know what's going to be in the budget.
So we heard in that clip that he believes the CBC is going to deliver unbiased news. So I don't know. Is that a new plan? Because I've never heard that before. And how giving them more money is going to change their mind to go? They're going to attack you now? What am I missing here, gentlemen?
Well, it was an election promise to increase funding for the CBC. We shouldn't be the least bit surprised, because that was one of Mark Carney's election promises. So we should not be at all surprised about that he campaigned on increased funding for the CBC. The Conservatives campaigned on defunding the CBC. Canadians made their choice.
I'm tired of people who send me emails when we get talking about the CBC saying it costs every Canadian $5 a year. That's all it costs. Okay, well, then make it a subscription service.
Well, the question, I mean, I guess we could spend days discussing whether or not Canada still needs a public broadcaster. Because that's where this comes down to. Do we still need or want a public broadcaster? And what would we want that public broadcaster to be? What would its mandate be? What would its role be? And we've been talking about the CBC. Canadians generally have been talking about the CBC for decades now. And the CBC has, on multiple occasions, tried to kind of redefine itself, but the definition is always so vague that we've got this massive corporation that doesn't really represent what Canada is all about anymore.
Here are the problems with the CBC. Never mind the bias. Never mind that it would be the equivalent of me appearing before a judge, but me paying their salary. It's absolutely ridiculous. But the problem with the CBC is essentially falls into two categories. One is they compete with the private sector, driving up prices for no good reason. Number two, they are completely biased. There's reams of evidence about how biased they are. And I think that's beyond question. The fact that Mr. Guilbeault likes the bias, not a big surprise. Not a big surprise at all. So that's the problem. And it just reveals a minister and a government that is out of touch with Western Canada. They seem to be in touch with parts of Central Canada. And that's a real concern. There are different solitudes in Canada. And but at the end of the day, I hope all Canadians wake up to the fact that this is a sinkhole of resources and we just don't have the money. We just don't. As to whether the CBC fulfilled an essential function historically, of course it did.
Yeah, if I could just jump in here very quickly, guys. Here's one of the challenges that we face right now, and that is that the CBC is increasingly popular with a lot of Canadians because of the failure of the private sector. Because right now, especially when it comes to radio and television, the current business model, as it stands for the private sector, does not support journalism. The business model just doesn't work right now. And so as private sector broadcasters slash jobs, slash salaries, put less qualified people on the air, offer a diminished product, people by default wind up going to the CBC because it's the less bad option for a lot of listeners and viewers.
But they're not paying, but because they're not paying. The private sector, if CBC wasn't selling advertising, all that advertising would go over to the private sector and maybe they could invest more.
The CBC sells barely no advertising. I mean, really, that's not what's killing the private sector.
Well, it's a big part of it. Guys sitting on the meetings, listen, I mean, they got a big chunk of the Google money. And why are they getting the Google money when you're getting all the money from the federal government? I mean, let's pause
for a second here. Jeff, you're not correct that CBC is more popular. It's popular among older people. It's not popular among the young. It's not popular among Western Canadians. It's not increasingly popular. It's a waste of resources. And we need to think about a public broadcast model like in the United States and elsewhere. We cannot be funding what it is, not only because of the bias, but because it competes with the private sector and because it takes away jobs and because it takes away advertising dollars.
So listen, this is my thought as a former politician. If I was there and somebody actually wanted my opinion, which they've never asked for, but say they wanted my opinion, I think you have to look at priorities. We only have so much money to go around. That's all we have. So I don't think we should be debating whether it's good or bad or this or that. Everyone's going to have their own opinion on it. But is it a priority in our country right now? Or is the priority that we have people going hungry? We have more people going to food banks, that we have people that are living on the streets, that we can't afford to put out more treatment centers for addiction. Is that more important than having a TV broadcaster that's received where their CEO is receiving hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars and cannot, I watched it on some of her questions on TV, cannot tell us how many people watch GEM. Yeah. She could, she doesn't want to.
Well, they're going to go to court to not have to do that. We're paying for their lawyers to protect them from telling us how few people are watching it. It's all a fair point about the cost. I do think that in a big, diverse country like Canada, we're sitting right on top of the cultural behemoth. There is a role for a public broadcaster to kind of bring the country together, to tell stories to each other. That's probably less important than it was. It's probably less important now than it was in the past. And the biggest problem is that when you watch the CBC, the vast majority of Canadians don't see themselves represented in their programming, in their reporting. It really does kind of represent the cultural elite of this country that exists within 10 square blocks in the city of Toronto. And that actually really bothers me. You know, if we're going to spend money on something to bring Canada together, then let's do that for real. Let's not have it turn into this kind of showcase of the elite in this country. I just do not like that at all.
It's social engineering 101. That's what the CBC is to me. That's just my opinion. Let's move on to a statement that was made by the Attorney General of Canada about the CRA. Here's that clip.
My office placed calls to contact centers and asked general or non-account specific questions. We found that agents' responses to individual tax questions were accurate only 17% of the time. And business tax or benefit questions were accurate just only half of the time.
My mistake. It was the Auditor General for Canada who spoke about CRA. 17% of the time they're right. 17%. I remember writing a column in the Winnipeg Sun not that long ago that stated we had 60,000 people that worked for CRA in Canada, and the IRS had 75,000. And they have 300 million people. We have 30 million people.
The problem, Kevin, is not numbers. The problem is qualifications.
Right. But does that get back to what Royce said with the CBC about, are they representative of Canada? Is the DEI hiring? I know people will be mad, but you got to ask the question. Are you hiring based on DEI, or are you hiring based on qualification for people that can do the job? Because my goodness, you can get information at your fingertips within seconds. You don't even have to type. You can ask Siri.
Yeah, and even the AG said that even for business, and the 17% was for individuals, even for business inquiries, businesses only got the correct answer 50% of the time. Well, that's not good enough. These are the people who handle all of our money. This is our money, and the people in the financial industry, the tax planners, tax experts, when they call up the CRA to ask a question on behalf of one of their clients, they can't afford to sit on hold for 30 or 40 minutes waiting for an incorrect answer. And it happens repeatedly. Now, the government some time ago issued that 100-day mandate for the CRA to clean up its act. I'm not sure how optimistic we should be that in 100 days that's going to happen. If anything happens to improve CRA, I think we should take some comfort in that. But this is clearly a completely dysfunctional organization which handles all of the tax money that comes into government coffers. It's terrifying.
But here's a newsflash. Mainstream media is spending more time on what Pierre Poilievre said than on the fact that CRA gets 17% of the answers correct.
Here's a newsflash. When the government builds a bureaucracy, it tends not to work. What do you know? It's really should be no surprise at all, but that is the case. Many people have someone who spend hours on hold with CRA, only then to be hung up upon or disconnected. It's very, very poor performance. They need to audit the auditors at CRA. But look, it's just par for the course. And in the United States, Elon Musk did what was it called, Doge, to try to thin things out, make things work better. I don't know how successful he was. Canada desperately needs an effective Doge. We won't get it with Mr. Carney.
Yeah, Canadians deserve better. You know, it's so stressful. 17%. I mean, we're reaching kind of failed state territory here. Holy cow!
But this has to go back a long time, guys. I mean, this incompetence at CRA didn't just happen since Mark Carney was elected. I mean, this has been years. This has been years in the making, hasn't it?
Yep, you're right.
But when you say Canadians deserve better, like this is, and to Jeff's point, it's been going on for years and years and years. I mean, when you go to renew your driver's license, I pack a lunch, bring a suitcase just in case an overnight bag, because you never know, right? You never know. You want to be prepared. So, I mean, why can we keep saying we deserve better, But what is it that we can do to get better? I noticed in BC in the news today that they're going, or no, sorry, I apologize. It's Alberta. They're going after the Minister of Education, and they're starting a petition to have him kicked out because of what's going on with the teacher strike there. Well, why aren't we seeing more of this across Canada then? I would start a politician for 90% of who's in office right now, if that was the case. So we keep hearing that we deserve better. What do we do to get better?
Well, we keep hearing about how Pierre Poilievre is too abrasive, and he's too harsh, and he's too much of a disruptor. Wow, maybe what the government needs is a disruptor. Maybe we need someone to go in and disrupt things. With news like this, I think that might be just what the doctor ordered.
And Jeff, I want to go back for a second. It's true this has been going on for years, but it's also true that under Trudeau and Carney, the civil service has expanded tremendously. Mm-hmm. It's hugely inefficient. That's the reality.
No question.
It applies to. Sorry. Go ahead. Wait. You know what James Carville once said? Forgive me for speaking while you're interrupting me. So just to go back for a sec, that's the reality. And I think Kevin started out with this point: what the numbers are at IRS versus CRA, with a population differential that's 10 times greater in the U.S. That's part of the problem. We can't have this level of fat in government. It leads to inflation. It leads to inefficiency. It leads to systems that simply don't work. And
I think we all agree on that.
Yeah.
But the federal civil service expanded when Stephen Harper was the prime minister as well.
Not at this level.
Not nowhere near this level. But I mean, Stephen Harper, for example, campaigned on we're going to be more efficient, but they added jobs to the civil service. And then Trudeau, of course, took it to, expanded it exponentially. And I think we all agree that our federal civil service is bloated, that it's unnecessarily large and inefficient. And but I don't know how you fix that, because the unions control the federal government. The federal government doesn't control the federal government and the bureaucracy. The unions do.
You went down a path I want to go down, because now all of a sudden we're starting to hear how racist it would be for the Canadian government to start cutting some of these positions because of the new hire being from being female or being, new Canadians or whatever. And it's already started. You can see it online already, where they're coming out saying you can't cut this staff. It is racist to cut the staff because you're getting rid of all the equal opportunity jobs or how that works.
Bring it on.
It's seniority rules, right? I mean, you can't have it both ways. But that's what happens. That's the country we have become. We know we have to cut jobs, but then when we start to cut jobs, they come out with the victim again and say, well, no, this is racist.
Kevin, I'll just say this. In Jimmy Carter's America, there was defeatism and lethargy, and Ronald Reagan came around and turned around, fired air traffic controllers who went on strike. We need, as Royce said, and I've said and others said, we need a disruptor. We need someone with the strength, the backbone, the character to say, enough, we got to turn the ship around. And as Mr. Trudeau the first said, let the bleeding hearts bleed. We have to fix the country. That's the priority.
Is he going to do it? Do you really think Pierre can do it?
I do. If he wins, if he get it, but the problem is, and Jeff pointed to this, the messaging has to be right, and there's a problem there, unfortunately.
I agree. Can't be angry.
Yeah.
You need hope. I want hope. I want to hear hope. And hope is that, yes, we're going to cut the public service because we have to, or the civil service. That's hope to me. Hope is that, a real leader, in my opinion, knows when not to raise taxes. They don't know when to raise taxes. They know when not to raise taxes. That's a leader, right? And making the cuts that aren't just cuts for the sake of saying, look at all these cuts I've made, or I want, what did they do in Gillingham and Winnipeg He came out, we're going to have 2% cuts. We're going to ask departments to cut their expenses by 2%. We're going to give them more money, but we're going to ask them to cut it by 2%. That's not how you do this, right? You go in and you say, this is how much money you have. You may have had this, but now you have this, and you're going to make it work. What politician's going to do that? Do you think that really we can put somebody else into office that can do that? Because where does the power lie? internal.
I think Pierre would do that. I think he has the strength, the intellectual strength, and the backbone to actually do it, but he has to jump the hurdle to get into office. And some of the messaging is contraindicated to jump that. And that's the issue. But he does have the intelligence and moral backbone to do that. So does Melissa Lansman. So do a bunch of people in the party. And Shuv Majumdar, a number of them do. And, if they get the message right, they'll have a chance to do that, which will be great for all of us.
I think what you're talking about there. Oh, sorry, go ahead, Royce.
Pierre is tough. I think we all know that, and he'll bring that into government. I think there was that period before the election campaign where we were starting to see Poilievre's softer side. He's talking more about his family, talking about his kids. There's a really compelling and interesting story there. And I think we need to see more of that, especially if there's going to be an election soon. I'd like to see more of that side of him. We know he's tough. We know he can take on Carney. But that sort of thing, it was the same thing with Harper's blue sweater way back in the day. He softened up his image. That's possible for Pierre as well, I think.
Which goes back to what we talked about earlier, a snap election. Because if you're Mark Carney's strategist, you're sitting there and you're saying people still think Pierre's angry. They think he's an angry person. Hit now. Get your mandate. Get your majority. Hit now. That's why I think we'll have an election sooner rather than later.
Do you have your boots on to go and help knock on doors?
I know.
Can you imagine if we get an election because Leah Gazan skipped the vote in the House of Commons?
I guess that could happen.
Yeah.
Like she could be one of the people that doesn't show up to vote. Which
That's very funny.
Which bothers me. You're paid to be there, and you don't have to be there a whole lot, right? So you can be there when you're supposed to be there and vote when you're supposed to vote. Like stand up and be heard. If you miss a vote, you should be fired. You're gone. Unless there's a really, 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 really good reason. You should be there for every vote to speak on behalf of those who elected you.
At least have the moral clarity to be there and abstain, to be there and, have some position. That's what you're paid to do, not to hide. I agree with you, Kevin.
I think it's funny, and Jeff, maybe you could correct me, but I think it's funny that with these votes, the biggest thing in their mind is not, is it good for Canada or bad for Canada? It's can I win if I call an election, can I win the election? Will we get more seats? It's got nothing to do with whether or not it will help us. It has everything to do with whether or not it will help their cause.
Oh yeah, and I do have to bow out here in a second, guys, because we've been at this. That's 4 bags of gas. Have been at this for a long time today, but the individual MPs will vote as the party whip instructs them to vote.
Mm-hmm.
That's the way it goes. And as we've said before, the only real currency political parties deal in is votes. Our currency is money. Their currency is votes. And no decision, no discussion is ever contemplated in any cabinet room, in any strategic room, but that currency is all that's talked about. That's the political reality of it. And that's why it doesn't matter all that much when we change governments, because the same currency applies to whoever is in power.
Well, but Jeff, if you look at the change, as I said before, of Ronald Reagan or Mrs. Thatcher, those were significant state turnarounds caused by elections.
Right.
They do sometimes matter with the right leadership, and I think Pierre has that. We'll see. Maybe. I hope we'll see. Will we thank Ms. Gazan for that? I don't know.
All right, guys.
It depends on the appetite of the electorate at any given time. We've talked about this before. Back in the mid-90s, there was a very powerful appetite among Canadians to balance the budget and pay down the national debt. But that attitude among Canadian voters hasn't existed for the last 30 years. Now, maybe it's coming again. Let's hope so.
Yeah. Thank you, guys. Good discussion today. Lots of good clips for us to look at. I look forward to speaking to you next week as we move in a couple of inches closer to a budget and potentially another election not that far away. So I appreciate your time, and I look forward to reading all of your columns in the Winnipeg Sun. If you're not in Winnipeg, you can always go online to winnipegsun.com and read the columns from Jeff, Lawrence, and Royce. Guys, have a great weekend.
You too. Thanks. You too.
Inside Politics with Kevin Klein. Please like and subscribe to this channel and visit the winnipegsun.com for more.